Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast that normally looks at the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time, but this is our Listener's Lounge in Season 3, doing something a little different, getting a chance to interview some cool guests and have some fun in more of a talk format rather than the movies by minutes format. We still love movies, we'll still be doing movies along the way, but this has been fun to sort of take a break and do something a little different. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Walt Murray. Walt, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here again. And again, in the Listener's Lounge, I'm really having a ball here, and tonight is going to be probably the wildest of Wilder rides so far.
we had a little bit of a delay. One of it was technical, the rest was storytelling time, and so I wish we had been rolling longer. I would have had some neat stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad we weren't.
So here we are, episode 3 of the show. We've had a couple of episodes already in the can and getting ready to bring in our third guest of this season 3. And this is a guest, Walt, that you actually wanted to bring on the show.
Yeah, when we started talking about doing the Listener's Lounge and bringing in some people that we wanted to interview, and we were talking about the kind of people that we wanted, you know, the first thing was that they would be entertaining. And I thought, I've got just the person for that. So a longtime friend of mine who I met in 9th grade, running cross country, believe it or not. Buddy of mine.
Wait a minute, hold on. Well, you ran cross country?
Well, it was ugly. It was very loosely defined as running, but I was there for the fun.
Well, you actually were of a slimmer build once upon a time.
Oh, there was a time when I was putting in about 40 to 50 miles a week running. So now I put in about 40 to 50 hours a week eating. So
see, folks, this is what happens when you get married and have children. You shouldn't do that.
No, you gotta keep up the running. So, but yeah, my freshman year of high school, I met Hawk Hagebak, and Hawk and I have been friends ever since, and we have been through all kinds of stuff together, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the 3 things that Hawk has done that are just fascinating to me, he was in the Coast Guard and got to do some crazy stuff there, and we'll ask him to tell some of his war stories. He was with the Cobb County, Georgia Police Department for about 20 years, I guess, and has recently retired from that, but all along he's also been a motorcycle rider and has written several books about his adventures on the motorcycle and going to all these bed and breakfasts and all these great motorcycle trails. So I have always wanted to hear him talk a little bit about that. So I thought this was a great opportunity to do that and let him tell us a little bit about his adventures. So and then recently he did a tour of Canada and the Western U.S. on his bike, and followed him around on Facebook through that whole adventure. And I think 3 different motorcycles that broke down and all kinds of stuff. So we'll let him tell all those stories, and really excited to have him on the show tonight.
Can I tell you, when you first put that name on the spreadsheet, I thought that was a made up fictional character from some comic book series. It's Hawk Hagebak. He's here with his machete and his, his Bolero, and he's got a bull that he rides into town on. He calls it Mongo Part 2.
Well, you would think that is a made-up character, but that is actually him. He has a Viking hat, and
either that or the character from the really crappy second season of Buck Rogers in the 25th century.
Yeah,
hey, Hawk man. You may call me Hawk for short. Arr, arr, arr. Why don't you ever do that, Hawk?
He probably will for us. So,
So I am actually really intrigued to meet somebody who's got such an eclectic career. First of all, Coast Guard, so military background or a service background, one of the service academies. Then you talked about in the police force, writing a book, riding a motorcycle. I mean, that's just makes me feel like I didn't do something right with my life. I sat back and thought I was accomplishing something. And then you look at people like that and go, shit, I haven't done anything.
No, compared to him, I've lived a very boring life. And I was hoping he would keep his Viking helmet on through the entire interview tonight. So, but do you want to go ahead and bring him on and let's...
Well, before we do, I was going to say, what's been going on with you this week? I wanted to set the stage on who's coming, but here you are trying to take over. I let you do one show. I let you host one. And here you are. You're like, oh, yeah, I want to get my friend on here.
Anything that I have to say that I've done this week is going to be boring compared to what Hawk is going to.
That's why we set the bar real low, and then we'll trip over it.
Exactly. Well, we did have we celebrated Memorial Day yesterday, so here in the U.S.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, I don't want people thinking that they're like, wait a minute, did I go back in time?
You missed 2 weeks of my life. No,
yeah, you were asleep for 2 weeks. The COVID virus hit you. We put you down.
Yeah, but we spent some time thinking and talking about that. And, I always try to take some time with my family and just let everybody be reminded of why we celebrate Memorial Day and why we do take that time out. And of course, everything in COVID is odd and not celebrated like it has been previously, but that was a good time. And then, of course, I always take some time to revisit some of my old favorite war movies like The Big Red One and Saving Private Ryan and Midway. So I've been kind of going through some of those the last few days, and then just life in general, just moving on. So yeah, it's been a good few days. How about you?
Yeah, similar. I had a chance to do a couple of things with WSB with our state being sort of on the forefront of opening up. A lot of folks are paying attention to what George is doing. We had the vice president visit and had a chance to be covering for the guy who would normally be on the air because he was with the vice president. But then that guy, Eric Erickson, calls into his show so I could interview him after we play the interview with the vice president. So I was like, hey, Eric, welcome to your show. I'm Alan hosting. How's it going? So it was a lot of fun. We did chat for a few minutes, so that was kind of cool to know that the VP was here. And then for the Memorial Day Monday, I got a chance to do the opening show at WSB, and we did talk as well, not only about war stories, and a lot of people were calling in talking about some of the heroics of their parents. A lot of the listeners having had parents or grandparents that served in World War II, they wanted to tell those stories. And then we did something similar that you were talking about war movie wise. I started collecting a list of all the best war movies that people would like to watch or their favorites or what they remember on this weekend if they would used to sit with their parents or like if they sat with their dad watching a movie. And there were a lot of very similar movies that would come up, Midway and Tora 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 and Patton, which is my all-time favorite as far as like if I'm going to kick back and watch just a great war movie. That's up there as one of my favorites. Heartbreak Ridge came up a couple of times. A couple of the Clint Eastwood movies came up like Flags of Our Fathers, Battle of Iwo Jima, Sniper, which is one that we didn't talk much about on our Saturday program. So it was cool to talk to a lot of people who realized these war movies weren't about glorifying war. It was about recognizing the heroic acts that is emblematic of why we celebrate Memorial Day, why we have it's a 3-word thing. We celebrate, honor, and remember. So even though this episode's coming out a couple of weeks after Memorial Day, there's never a wrong time to be thankful for those who are willing to fight for the freedoms that some of us may take a little for granted.
No, I agree. And coming from a military family, on both sides of our family, on my side, both of my uncles on my mom's side were in the Navy. My other uncle was in the National Guard. My dad, of course, is a Vietnam vet. On my wife's side of the family, they're actually a Gold Star family. They have lost my mother-in-law's brother, who is from Cartersville, Georgia, where your radio station is, was killed in the Korean War. And my father-in-law lost a brother in World War II. He was on a ship, transport ship that got torpedoed by the Japanese. So every year that is something that's big in our family. And, you really do appreciate what the families go through when they deploy a family member. It's definitely difficult. And I can't express how much I appreciate the people who go and the people who they leave and what all those folks go through to keep us free.
Yeah, I had a military family on my side with my dad. He was career Army. I went into the Navy, did my little bit during Gulf War I. He was in during Vietnam, did not have to go overseas, was in a position where he didn't have to do any kind of combat. He was in the Signal Corps. I was in intelligence. But of course, with the last name Sanders, my dad managed to make it all the way up to Colonel. So that was always fun for us to remind everybody that my dad was, in fact, Colonel Sanders. And we would always go, "What's the matter, Dad? Chicken?" He didn't think that was funny.
Yeah, I'm sure he really appreciated that.
Yeah, and because I had a little college before I joined, I got to go in straight away as an E3. So I was known as Seaman Sanders, and that was always a lot of fun. You know, you fill in your own joke there.
Yes.
Some people say that it keeps on coming.
We could take a very dark turn tonight, couldn't we?
Yes. I'm trying to set the stage. So, all right, but that's about it. That's it's been a fairly pretty mild week. We just had I wanted to make sure, since I know we have a little bit of a delay in the time we have our guests before they air, it is nice to do a shout out for those folks that we celebrated Memorial Day just a couple of weeks ago. So, all right, anything else before we bring our guest on?
No, I think that's about it for me.
Okay. Well, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you make the first introduction, since you've got a much better handle on the guest's background. I like to jump in with questions as I hear the answers. So let's go ahead and welcome in your guest.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, the guest tonight is Hawk Hagebak, who I have known for 35 years or more. And Hawk has been one of my best friends all these years, but he is the one guy who our family probably has more lore about than even any of our other family members. And Hawk is just a great friend. And as our audience knows, I lost my mom not too long ago. And Hawk was a third son to her. So I know my mom is very happy that Hawk's on the show tonight. So Hawk, welcome. And thanks for coming on the Wilder Ride.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, guys. And I got to tell you, after that introduction, first off, Walt's mom, the only reason that I really befriended Walt is because his mom was so pretty. I loved hanging out at the house. His little sister didn't do anything for me. She was really small, but now she's pretty cute, so I get it. And
yeah, I can't tell you how many times I heard, well, is your mom going to be there?
So
took me a while to figure that one out, but
he starts singing that song. Walter's mom has got it going on. Hey, Walt's mom, do you need your lawn mowed? Maybe
right.
Your pool cleaned? You need any pipes cleaned?
She needed all of that because Walt sure wasn't doing it, and neither was his brother.
Oh no!
And, I listened to the intro, and that was great. A good description of how long we've met, and talking about Walt running cross country. That was actually a trick that the cross country coach used so that we could win more matches, because Walt would always win by a nose. If you've never met Walt, just know that his schnoz is so big, and the rest of the team, we would just get behind Walt and shove him, and his nose would always come across that line first. It was amazing. So
it was almost unfair that
to win by
I
a
always
nose,
won by a
to
nose.
win by a nose, that's where the phrase come from. That's just so you know.
And the funny thing is, he was like 30 feet behind everybody, but he still won.
Oh yeah, no, it was
all the time. All the time.
Wow. Well, you willingly put yourself in this.
Well, I've got plenty of ammo to go along with this tonight.
Oh,
so
no.
Okay.
No,
so
he doesn't actually. So I have it on good authority that a couple weeks ago for Memorial Day, Walt did not actually watch Saving Private Ryan. He watched Shaving Ryan's Privates. I know that to be true. I've seen what he has downloaded, and that is, you are a disgusting animal, Walt. You are a disgusting
It's a
animal.
horrifying list.
And,
yes,
and
it
Alan,
is a horrifying.
not to leave you in the background there, I'm so thankful to meet a Navy veteran, and the fact that that I don't hear you chewing on your shirt is a really good thing. I mean, I know Navy intelligence and all that. I'm an old Coast Guard guy. Go ahead, make your puddle pirate joke, be done with it. But man, you are doing a good job speaking clearly with that shirt probably sticking out of your mouth. I know that's happening. I know that is happening.
Just bite down real hard. It'll be over with soon.
but really,
hey, man, it's your night in the barrel.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
So, and really with a name like Hawk Hagebak, so a couple years ago, I was at a wedding, one of my daughter's friends. So I'm of an age now where I'm invited to daughter's friend's wedding because I have money now. And they're like, well, we need somebody to buy the gift, because 30-year-olds can't buy shit. So they invite the parents of their friends. So anyway, so I went to this wedding and I'm talking to this kid, 35-year-old man. And I said, yeah, hey, my name's Hawk. And he's like, wait, don't move. Just hang on just a second. And he darts across the dance floor, grabs his wife, comes back over and says, wait, introduce yourself again. I'm like, well, hi, ma'am, I'm Hawk. And she's like, oh, God, no. And she said, he's been trying to talk me into naming our next son Hawk Burt Reynolds Ferguson, all these cool names like Hawk Rambo, Burt Reynolds Ferguson, like, holy shit. And she's like, now there's a Hawk, and now I've met one. So it's a real thing. And
why would that be
a
problem?
I gotta jump in because that's the first question I have is Hawk the nickname you've always gone by, or is that your actual legal first name?
So brace yourself for a little Norwegian heritage, all right? Since you asked. The real first name is Haakon, which is as common as Robert in the U.S. It's that common in Norway. But we are not in Norway right now. And you put that many vowels together in your first name, that freaks people out to a full dead stop. So I've pretty much been Hawk most of my existence. It was much easier for the kindergarten teacher in LaGrange, Georgia, to pronounce Hawk instead of the ethnic Norwegian name with the 3 vowels in only 6 letters. She actually said, darling, you got too many vowels here in your front name. We're going to have to call you something different. Your name is Hawk from now on. And I was like, yes, ma'am, I'm Hawk. And I went home to tell my very staunchly proud Norwegian parents that I had been renamed to Hawk. My dad was pissed and he wrote a letter. My mom went full Karen on him, but didn't matter.
A strongly worded missive to the principal and the teacher.
I've seen your dad's letters. I'm surprised they let you back in school.
Yeah. Well, they were afraid, actually. My dad wrote insane letters. He was a brilliant man. But and with a name like Hawk, there are only so many jobs that you can do for a living. I mean, you can't really be like, Hawk the plumber. It's got to be something a little more, you're like destined to do something stupid. Yeah. So I looked, occupation wise, I could be international man of mystery. I could be a fighter pilot. I could be a motorcycle cop. I went the cop route because the school is a lot shorter, and actually was like a motorcycle cop for about 12 years, and that was awesome. I looked more like John, but acted a lot more like Punch in my bachelor days. But man, had a great time. Before that, I was in the Coast Guard. I was a navigator. I was stationed in Key West for 3 years, and then I got transferred to Antarctica for a day, from November to March. The sun never set. But, a lot of people... that's true.
Very long day.
It just lasted 6 months.
Right. A lot of people that get out of the military, they've earned that Purple Heart. Well, let me tell you something. After 3 years in Key West, Florida, I had a purple liver, and I think that counts for something. Dude, that's got to count for something.
That's okay, because as long as you were in Antarctica, you probably got blue balls. So
I didn't actually have those at the time yet. I was still in my early 20s. They hadn't descended. And now that I'm a full-on granddad, I can tell you that now when I walk, my balls actually drag on the pavement. I mean that, and the fact that they're so big, because I am a retired police officer, motorcycle guy, helicopter pilot, scuba diver, all that crap. I have grandes testículos, as they say back in the old country. Can I say grandes testículos on this podcast?
It is preferred that you say that on this podcast.
All right. Well, let's do this, because if we don't interrupt, I have a feeling the show will not only be a lot longer than the 1 hour we try to keep it to, we won't actually scratch the surface of any of the questions that I wanted to know. So let's you kind of hit a couple of things. First off, what made you decide Coast Guard? I mean, was it the Coast Guard Academy? Did you just always want to go in the Coast Guard? What about it that drew you into sort of out of school, I'm going to the Coast Guard?
All right, so the Coast Guard, not kidding, and I'm not slamming any other military service. I think military service is great. Coast Guard is, it was Department of Transportation. Now it's Department of Homeland Security. So it's not under DOD because you have power to arrest civilians in the Coast Guard. So their peacetime mission is life-saving drug interdiction. We did HMIOs, Haitian Migration Interdiction Operations. Let's say that 3 times fast. You can prove you're not drinking. But so the peacetime mission of the Coast Guard was appealing to me, and I was pretty adept at all things boats. I was raised on the water. I was raised, driving boats. I sailed boats. I raced sailboats, and I knew everything about the water except how to get anywhere. And I figured, who better to teach me how to navigate than the people that set the buoys in place? So I joined the Coast Guard. And, Navy service, you're 6 months out, you're 6 months in. Coast Guard, it's 2 months out, 2 months in. That's what it was on my first ship. It was a 270-foot cutter. And that was pretty brutal, too. But we would tour the Caribbean, and any job that they give you sunscreen doesn't suck. I'm telling you, when you have a job, when they issued me Timberline deck shoes and Bermuda shorts to do boardings with, I thought, I have joined the correct service. I'm doing okay here. Yeah. So there you go.
So how long were you in the Coast Guard before realizing you wanted to shift to a new career?
Well, so I know you picked up on the fact that I was in Key West, Florida for 3 years, and then 1 year in Antarctica. So in the Coast Guard, it's a 3-year billet. So that Antarctic deployment kind of solidified my desire to leave after my 4-year commitment was up. I was like, you know what?
Hey, what happened? What happened to Key West?
Right.
What the fuck?
I was like, literally standing on the ice one day, drinking a beer, because you can't drink on a U.S. flag military vessel, but the captain would offload pallets of beer onto the ice in Antarctica, and we would go onto the ice, drink a couple beers, stagger back onto the ship, and continue the day. Well, while I'm standing there one day, drinking the beer in Antarctica, I look at the side of the ship, and right there on the side of the ship are the words, U.S. Coast Guard. And I'm thinking, we're nowhere near the U.S. coast. This is bullschnizzle. And so I was done. I was like, no, my recruiter lied about that. The whole Key West thing was awesome. Antarctica, oh, it was cool. It was 40 below cool, but it was cool. Yeah, that. So
they hooked you with Key West, and then they went, ha, guess what?
Yeah.
Too late now. You're in.
Well, actually, that Antarctic deployment was a really sought after ship. It was a really sought after deployment. I was on the Polar Sea, at the time one of only 2 saltwater icebreakers. Now I think there are 4 or 5. So it was really a great thing to do. But having done it a time, I didn't need to do it anymore. And so I got out of the Coast Guard, and what I had learned was law enforcement and navigation. Well, I had a 6-pack license, so I could take 6 passengers for hire on a sailboat or a boat. But I'm going to charter at 22 years old. So I came back, joined the local police department where I had grown up. Walt and I had a friend in high school that was she was abducted and murdered, and so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna spend my career making sure that kind of thing never happens again, at least in that particular area. And sort of a weird way that happened. I was assigned to the Cumberland precinct where she had been abducted, and then later was commander of the 3rd precinct. And right before I retired, I assigned her case to the cold case unit at the DA's office. Found the guy, and he had just died in prison, pancreatitis. I'm told it was very painful. Good for him, but he was in prison for a similar act and had been for years and years. But that's kind of the roundabout, not very funny story of why I chose a police career in that particular area. But literally a month before I retired, I got the phone call that they had solved the case.
That's awesome. I mean, I don't like the fact of, the underlying circumstances, but the fact that before you left the force, the murder that sort of inspired you, or the missing case, the abduction, and it got full circle before you got out.
Yeah, it was crazy because I worked everywhere in the police department, and I worked the Cumberland precinct in uniform. I worked special operations. I was a motorcycle guy. I worked undercover, and I actually hold the record still for the most prostitutes arrested by any agent in the history of the Cobb County, Georgia Police Department when you measure by weight, not by numbers of prostitutes.
Which is typically how they do that, right?
My hookers were really big. And Walt used to call me up and say, Hawk, who hires hookers that are that big? I'm like, Walt, you can stop the question at who hires a hooker. If you're calling for a hooker, you're not opening up the Motel 6 door and seeing a 400-pound girl and sending her away. You're not interested in that. Oh, wow. Well, there you go.
So the tonnage award goes to you.
Always. Yeah. And it got to be kind of funny. Like, all the other undercover agents knew it. We would make these dates online or on the phone or call a service, whatever. And it didn't matter who they thought had arrived at the hotel. All the agents doing the counter surveillance to pick up the pimps that were dropping off the hookers, they would say, well, this one must be Hawk's because she is 400 pounds. And she would waddle on up to the door. And sweet baby.
Hey.
That's right. Sweet baby.
I'm about to make your day.
Come on in. Well, a lot of those girls were actually being trafficked. And so, like, working the massage parlors, it was kind of funny for me. I'd get home from work and, typical conversation between a husband and wife. Well, how was your day at work, honey? It was awesome. I got 4 massages and 2 offers for a hand job and more, and that was just, I come home with baby oil all over me and powder, and she's like, go shower. You're gross. You're gross.
Hey, Daddy, can you read me a book? I hear you like happy endings.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Daddy does.
Leave it to the Navy guy to know the right term. Okay. All right.
Look, you just turn the lights off real dark and pretend.
Anchors away, buddy. Anchors away, man. Woo.
Yeah. I know Walt was trying to get in words edgewise, but every time I meet somebody fascinating, it's just like, I can't help it because Walt already knows you. So this is like not new to him. For me, it's all brand new. I'm just learning this stuff. So you already had 2 careers. You had a stint in the Coast Guard for like 4 years, and then you've done the military, or the police, the Cobb County Police Department. How long was that? You said 12 years?
No, I was in the police department 27 years. I retired as a
27
as a captain. Yeah.
Okay, so 12 was just riding a motorcycle.
Yeah, just 12 of that was on a motorcycle. About 9 as an officer, 2 as a sergeant, and then 1 as a lieutenant.
Wow. So now, what made you decide that you'd had enough? Like before you decided, okay, time for a different career.
I don't know if you've watched the news at all in the last decade, but
yeah, great question, Alan. Great question.
I don't know if you've seen, because let me
rephrase that question. So, since the public likes the police department so much, why in the world would you leave such a great job?
Why would you ever leave? People love us. No, I was actually one of the good guys. I never beat an unarmed suspect or killed any unarmed suspects.
Now, if they had arms, though, then it was fair game,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, then I was I got in some
had no arms.
I got into some hot things, but 27 years on, they told me, "Hey, we'll send you money not to come to work anymore. We'll send you like 3/4 of your salary and you don't have to do this anymore." And I was like, okay, I will not do this anymore.
It's a deal.
So this is where, Walt, I'll let you take over at this point, because now we get sort of a creative side, I think, the book writing.
Yeah, and you've written books for years. But why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Hawk? Because that's probably the area I know the least about of what you do, even though I've read a couple of the books. But what got you into writing in the first place?
Well, it was a guy named Larry DeWitt, and I'll be short. I see I'm eating up your time tonight. Sorry. But
no, we're good.
So it was a guy named Larry DeWitt. I've been riding motorcycles for years. Like I took my honeymoon to Seattle and back. Yes, took the wife too on the motorcycle. You have to marry the right woman and have the right motorcycle to do that honeymoon, right? So and then so we ride a lot. Well, then my friends would ask me, "Hey man, I want to take my girlfriend for a ride up in the mountains of North Georgia this weekend. Can you draw me a map? Maybe give me some idea about a good restaurant or something." So I would pull out a napkin and draw on a napkin a map, and I would explain, "No, this is a historical place. You're going to want to pick up a rock about 3 miles before you get there and throw it onto this Indian princess's grave. It'll bring you good luck." "Really?" "Yeah, do that." "Yeah, that's at Georgia 60 and 129. So anyway, after about 4 of these napkins, my buddy Larry said, "Man, why don't you write a book?" And I'm like, "Because I'm a motor cop." And he's like, "Well, who better to write it than somebody who knows a motorcycle really well and knows the area real well? I mean, who else is going to write? Alex Haley? Like he's a rider, but he doesn't know anything about motorcycles."
The great motorcycle rides of Alex Haley.
Now, those of you in the know will know that Alex Haley was a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. That's right. There's a Coast Guard cutter named after Alex Haley. Anyway, so I wrote a book about motorcycling in North Georgia, East Tennessee, and a little piece of Western North Carolina. And I shopped that book to publishers. I bought a book called How to Get Your Book Published. Sounds real stupid, but instead of being a self-published author, I reached out to publishing houses and to see if they would be interested in publishing this work. And so they publish it. So they spend all the money on publishing, marketing, and getting it out to the shops. All I have to do is look pretty, show up at motorcycle events, smile and wave, and sign books, and make millions of dollars, which never happened. I made tens of dollars on books. So the first book came out, and that was North Georgia, East Tennessee, a little piece of Western Carolina. And within about a month, the publishing house called me and said, "Hey, people are calling and asking for your Western North Carolina book." And I said, I don't have that. And they said, "Right, go do that." And so I took off and did research. I was still working with the police department, but I would take about a week off, go research, come back with notes, and then I would write. All this while I'm raising, count them, 4 daughters. I was married with 4 kids, had a full police career, was promoted to sergeant. So it was a lot to balance. Well, then the second book came out, and about a year later, they said, "Hey, people are asking for your West Virginia book." And I'm like, "Sweet, I guess I know I'm going to go there." And they're like, "Yeah, here's a bunch of money for research." And so I did that. So those books came out. The book 3, the West Virginia book, came out about 8 years ago. And they are bestsellers in their genre. Now, the genre is Southeastern Motorcycle Adventure Guidebooks. So, all I get out of that is bragging rights, really.
I think I'm number 3 on that list, and I haven't even published a book.
Right. Yeah. and right now I'm working on another book. So I'm sure Walt will get to this, but I just did like a 5-month tour of North America. I did 21,000 miles, 92 days on the road. Now, those listeners just picked up on the math. They said 92 days does not make 5 months. Right. But if you're in Banff National Park in Canada and you just breeze through there without getting off your bike and hiking around for 4 or 5 days, you're screwing up. Same thing in Utah or whatever. So 92 days of travel on the motorcycle, about 21,000 miles. And I'm writing a book about that experience.
That's amazing. So, your adventures on being on a motorcycle, seeing the world, kind of seeing the world around you. This is kind of cool. I'm going to pull it back to what's going on right now. A lot of people, I read an article just this weekend that a lot of people are, I say a lot, about 40% of respondents to this poll said during the lockdown, shelter in place, the COVID-19, are you feeling like you're learning anything? Are you gaining anything positive? And about 2 in 5, or about 40%, said, I'm learning what's important. I'm learning that walking outside, looking at like the world around me, putting the phone down, just connecting with nature, going on a hike, going on a walk, going on a ride, but really looking at what's around me. There are more people discovering you don't have to stay connected to the internet 24/7 looking for the next, who retweeted, or what's the next tweet, or what's the next retweet, or you can catch up on all that later. And it almost feels like you discovered that already well before, somebody needed to be put in lockdown to realize, hey, there's a beautiful world out there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And sort of the impetus to that was I had a pretty shocking personal loss in late 2018, and that really caused me to hit the pause button. After I retired from the police department, that was 4 years ago. I was a consultant doing traffic incident management, public safety kind of stuff, and they were throwing wads and wads of cash at me, which was great, but still it was 40 to 60 hours a week. I was still kind of on that treadmill. Well, then early November of 2018, I lost my father. He was 82 years old. He was in okay health, but it was a shock to me. I had just had a conversation with him the day before he passed away, saying, "Hey, I'm really going to need you around because my wife had stage 4 cancer, and she passed away 11 days after my dad." And so I could not have stuck around that house any longer. My daughters are grown. I have 4 daughters, all over 20. 3 of them are in their 30s and married in somebody else's problem. But my youngest is 20, so she's doing okay. So, and I had a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house in Metro Atlanta. And I said, yeah, I don't need this. So I sold it. I sold my dad's house, sold my car, sold 2 motorcycles, bought one specifically for this trip, and literally moved a few things into a storage container and had that just shipped off and said, I'll call you when I'm ready for it. And they charged me $250 a month for storage. And I just went out and rode my motorcycle around, just
wow,
seeing what I wanted to do when I grow up. And I still don't know.
Wow. That's, I mean, I hate that it happened in the sense of the double loss like that. That's just amazing to have to deal with. But at the same time, it's great to talk to somebody who's got such a positive sense of the world and an outlook. I mean, you've got a great sense of humor. And as a dad of 4 daughters myself, Walt's a dad of 3 daughters. Man, what did we do wrong? We're just surrounded by women nonstop. Dude, I get told every single day what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's funny now. I live in Western North Carolina on top of a mountain. I'm at 4,100 feet here. All by myself with no daughters. There is not one thing pink in here. Every room has a motorcycle in it. And if I track motor oil through the carpet, I'm okay with it. No, I'm not actually a slob. I'm just saying nothing is pink. There is not. a woman's touch in here at all. Well, there is,
Wow.
but I have to pay her, and she's big. Let me just say, big girl. But she shows up every couple weeks, like clockwork. So she's fine. She's
Hey, remember me? You put me on the right path.
well, she's
the path right to your door.
She's actually losing a lot of weight now because I'm talking about this fictional prostitute that comes to my house. Yeah,
right.
She's losing a lot of weight because the meth has caused her to lose her teeth, and so other than milkshakes, she can't really get a lot of calories in. So she's dropping the lbs pretty fast. So I'm encouraged.
Oh my God. Hey, baby, I want to take you on a ride, but look at that cycle. It ain't going to fit both of us.
Yeah. Lose another tooth, baby. Lose another tooth. Yeah. And
wow.
And on the motorcycle trip, I have a Facebook page. It's Motorhawk Rides on Facebook. And people would follow me every day, and I had a GPS unit, and every day I would kind of blog about it. Well, I also took GoPro footage every day, and it's sort of banter like this. Some days was just dry, and some days was funny or interesting, whatever. But I'm now putting those video logs, the vlogs, on YouTube. If you search Motohawk on YouTube, you'll see a bald guy smiling really big. That's me. That's the Motohawk to click on. But I made that just so kind of people could follow along the ride and see how the bike was doing, how I was doing. Some days were better than others where, that sense of loss. My mother, she's 80. My mother asked me, why are you running away? And it wasn't that I was running away on this trip, and it became super clear to me on the trip that I wasn't running away. I was running toward whatever I was going to be next. And whatever I'm going to be next, I'm still figuring that out exactly. But whatever that is, it's a very happy guy. I've taken a comedy class. I do comedy in clubs. When they invite me, it's okay to call me. But seriously, I've got some stand-up routines, and I love laughing, and when I can make people laugh and snort, that's success, And by snort, I don't mean like Walt snort, because his gargantuan nose. I mean
that's dangerous.
Tremors in the Southeast.
Well, when you told me that you were taking that trip, my reaction was, that makes sense. I totally get it. Like, just knowing you and picturing you on the bike, just riding and letting the wind blow and letting it kind of,
certainly not through your hair,
not right now through your beard, but just kind of to help you untangle all that stuff. I knew that was the right thing, and so I knew it was going to be a good thing for you, and I knew it was going to kind of help give you some clarity and things like that. But I really appreciated those vlogs and those daily updates, because it kind of helped me walk through that with you, and and then also to find every good motorcycle repair shop on the northern North American continent. So, because there were so many days it was like, damn it, here's another repair shop.
Yeah.
But to go on a sojourn like that, to just take time for you, because a lot of times we do that when we're younger, then we get into the routine of family and career and job, and a lot of people never get the chance to go back and do that. And even though it's tragic circumstances, you're getting a chance to do something at still a young enough age to go out and explore. And like you said, you don't know what you're going to find, but it's the new you, whatever that new adventure is. And the fact that you're allowed to go do that and write about it along the way is kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, if anyone is seeking permission to do something like that, I grant them permission. You're allowed. Go do it. Do it. If you have a spouse, go ride with your spouse. Lisa and I, we took our honeymoon to Seattle and back. People did not understand that. And now people do ask me, on your honeymoon, did y'all sleep on the ground? I'm like, I'm dumb enough to ask her to ride a motorcycle across the country and back. I'm not dumb enough to ask her to sleep on the freaking ground next to me. But on this trip, and even on our honeymoon, any motorcycle trip that I take, you just, and through hikers on the AT talk about it too, you get into the cadence of the day. Like you wake up around this time, you go do this and this and this. The one thing that was consistent every single day. Now, I traveled alone on my 5-month trip. Traveled alone. People ask, were you lonely? Never. Because, Alan, I've never met you, but I know you already. And if I was in a bar, I'd be sitting at the bar, you'd be sitting next to me, and you and I would be trading stories about Navy, Coast Guard, and I would be making fun of you, you'd be making fun of me. And that's how things are. Everywhere I went, this persona that you hear in this podcast, that's the real me. When you meet me in person, you're like, oh shit, that's really Hawk. That's all I've got.
That wasn't
a
performance.
Knowing you for 35 years, that is 100% true.
Yeah. Never met a stranger.
Awesome.
The other one point that I'll make about the trip, everywhere I went, the first question that I would ask somebody when I would walk into a business or a home or whatever, I would say, how can I help you? And it was amazing to me how often the answer was sincere. Like, oh, I need help finishing the basement. My daughter's turning 14 this weekend, and I need crown molding done and this done. Or I was in northern Yukon, southern Yukon actually, in Watson Lake, and I pulled into a gas station, and I said, hey guys, I'd like to just hose off my motorcycle. And they said, yeah, no problem. And I said, but before I do, how can I help you? And they said, well, the painter is having a hard time around the corner building the scaffolding. You mind doing that for a few minutes? No. And when you help somebody out, there's some buy-in, and people were interested. When you're in northern Yukon or northern Alaska with Georgia tags, people are like, what are you doing, man? Like, what?
That's really cool.
Anyway, I kind of took over there.
No, it's really, really cool. We went a little long on that, but I don't care because it was a fantastic story to tell. And if people need a little bit of positivity for whatever reason, a lot of times people think they're facing challenges and that somehow the challenges are their own and not shared, or that nobody understands, or nobody's going to get it, or it's all by themselves. It's only by yourselves if you let yourself be by yourself. You need to open that up and realize we are all together. That's why I hate this term social distancing. It drives me batshit crazy. Fine. You need to be physically distant. Fine. You don't have to be socially distant. You can still talk to one another from 6 feet apart. You and I could have been at a bar 6 feet apart, still sharing stories.
Absolutely. No, and that's just the way of the world. Actually, I mean, people are more inclined to be socially close than socially distant. And yeah, physically distant, that's one thing. Socially distant, it's another. And although Facebook does connect us with a lot of friends and all that jazz, there's a big difference between sitting at a breakfast bar in Alaska, in Anchorage, talking to the stranger next to you who smells like fish, who just came off a 72-day fishing expedition, and finding out what that's like, versus going online and seeing who has a pretty dress or who's wearing the cool new tie. One is far more important than the other. So yeah, there's. I think I'm ready for physical distancing to be over. I'm ready to meet some strangers, and that's the one weird thing that this retired cop taught all of his daughters. You would think that as an overprotective dad, I would have taught my daughters stranger danger, stay the hell away from strangers. Instead, I taught them how to meet a stranger. This is what you do. You walk up to them, you say, hey, my name is Stacy. I'm new here. I don't know what the hell's going on. You look friendly. Can you tell me 3 cool things about your town? Do you know how many people walk away from that question? Not a fucking one of them. There you go. There's a hard F word for you. Sorry, gave you something to edit.
It works good for me, man. I love it. We got to have more conversations, less. People just tend today with social media, they tend to go on platitudes. They tend to just pontificate about this is my opinion, and if you disagree, well, fuck you. Well, you know what? We can have disagreements, we can have discussions, but when we forget how to communicate, guess what? We're never going to be able to grow ourselves. You only get better yourself if you actually open yourself to other people. So that's my 2 cents, and I love meeting people like you. Walt, what a great guest to bring on for our segment. I feel like we're going to have to bring him back once we're allowed to let him go back on a motorcycle ride and catch up on part 3 of his life and see what's going on.
Well, I was not worried about going short tonight.
No, this is going to be bonus time on this episode. I already feel that. We put a little overtime in on this one.
Well, Hawk, before we move on to the next portion of our show, how do people find you?
Well, so they can find me online at motohawk.com. I have a website, motohawk, motohawk.com. Also on Facebook at Motohawk Rides, and of course the YouTube page Motohawk. Now there are a couple of Motohawks, so look for the one with the dude with a beard wearing the helmet. That's me, and you can watch all of those videos. I'm out of Alaska now, making the videos, and I'm about to enter California, so you can watch all that. Yeah, that's how people can find me.
And your books are on Amazon,
yeah,
right?
Books on Amazon. Book is available on Amazon and at motorcycle shops and bookstores near you. Honestly, not kidding. I'm so pleased and blessed by the distribution network. My publishing house, Milestone Press, they actually sold a couple of years ago, and they sold me and my rights to publishing rights anyway to University of Georgia Press, which is a much bigger house than Milestone Press was. And so with University of Georgia Press behind me, we're just going like gangbusters. Brilliant. Great.
Well, I will say I've read the first 2 books, and I'm not a bike rider, but you don't have to be to enjoy the books. So I would say anybody who's looking just for some good, entertaining reading, go find those books.
Sweet. Well, you know what? Stuff we find out in the books, and that's kind of like individual news, personal news, things that's happening to an individual. We have a lot of interesting things that happen to individuals, and it's time for us to roll into our news segment. So, Hawk, it sounds like you have no problem throwing in some improv commentary with a comedy background and your writing background. You want to hang out with us till the end of the show?
Sure. I'll make the end of the show happen around 3.5 more hours. Let's do it.
Well, Walt, let's run to this. We usually bring a couple of news items, and for folks new to the listening group out there, our listeners' lounge, we always come at it cold. Nobody knows what the other person's bringing. So, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll jump right in. So our first article tonight comes from The Independent, and they picked up a story out of Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm sure this is going to be a new one for us. The headline: Hospital angrily denies snake discovered in operating theater, insists there was only a monkey.
Wait. So, the outrage wasn't about, look,
yeah,
monkey's okay.
Yeah, the monkey's fine. So a hospital in Trinidad and Tobago has admitted a monkey was discovered inside the building, but angrily denied a snake was with it too. The simian was reportedly spotted in Port of Spain General Hospital's operating room early on Friday by medical staff who were preparing to resume elective surgeries following the 3-month interruption due to COVID. The incident.
No, wait a second. When it comes to cleanliness, the monkey flings poo. Okay.
Oh no.
Okay.
Well, and with my stories, it just keeps getting better. So the incident caused hours-long delays in operations, with zoo workers called in to capture the animal. In a statement, the region's health authority said it was aware of 2 posts circulating on social media. One which was captioned "Monkey and Big Snake found in the Port of Spain General Hospital yesterday." Another featured a video clip of a monkey clambering around on a shelf at the hospital. The statement reported by The Guardian on Saturday reads, "The authority categorically denies that a snake was also found in the hospital's compound, and any information suggesting same is false, misleading, and malicious." The incident is currently being reviewed in an effort to implement appropriate measures to prevent a recurrence.
Well, here's an idea. Just don't let wildlife into the hospital.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Lock the door.
There is
Seems
no
like a pretty easy
question
one.
that during this whole COVID crisis, there's been a huge shortage of nurses. And I support Trinidad and Tobago's attempt at training that monkey to be a good nurse. But it takes a little bit, well, it takes a lot more training than that. I've got to be sensitive. I have a daughter that's a nurse. But I'm just telling you, man, when you're short for orderlies and nurses and all that because of staffing, my goodness, I mean, that's kind of reaching the bottom of the barrel. Monkeys in a barrel, anybody?
Yeah,
anybody? Come on, people. You got to get with me on the monkeys in a barrel. Come on, dude.
Well, Mr. Chuckles RN is going to premiere on NBC next month, I'm sure. So.
Oh, my God. Great story. Well, this one might appeal to the police officer and our guest. I don't know if you saw this. It was reported on Fox News, but it was out of other places as well. A South Carolina boy, age 6, reels in a sunken safe and helps break a robbery case wide open. It's like Encyclopedia Brown or the Hardy Boys 2020 style. A 6-year-old baby Gumshoe helped crack a nearly decade-old robbery case when he reeled in a locked safe from the bottom of a South Carolina lake. And this was back in May when people were still able to do some things maybe outside, but being distant. A photo was provided by Catherine Brewer. Knox Brewer stands there with a safe he pulled out of the Whitney Lake in South Carolina. The 6-year-old was using a magnet attached to a string to fish for metal in the water. Have you ever heard of that? Metal going fishing with a magnet?
I have heard of people doing that.
I've heard of that, but the fish taste like shit.
Yeah, but they're rich in iron. Well, Knox Brewer of Johns Island took up magnet fishing. I love it. He's 6. He just took it up. He was bored one day. The crayons are no longer holding any interest for him. Took up magnet fishing and began hunting for metal objects underwater as a way to pass time during the coronavirus pandemic. The boy was out with his family at Whitney Lake this month with the magnet attached to his line when it stuck to something heavy in the mud below. With the help of a bystander, Knox pulled in and pried open what turned out to be a waterlogged lockbox containing debris-covered jewelry, credit cards, and a checkbook, according to a video of the discovery. So, he said, I knew the right thing to do was to go ahead and call the local authorities. That's what the mom says here. Get them involved and try to solve the mystery. Authorities determined the sunken safe belonged to a woman who lived across the street from the lake. She said it had been stolen from her home 8 years ago. So while most of the expensive items had been taken, the find still turned out to be a valuable catch, according to the Brewers. They said they were able to reunite her with charms from an old bracelet. The first thing she did was just kneel down, hug Knox, and thanked him. And then apparently without social distancing, thanked him again for bringing closure to the robbery that denied her of her safe and some of her precious jewels. Cool story, I thought.
It's a heartwarming tale, but it's not Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, if there was a body in there, I'd be like, hell yeah, Junior, you did good, man.
Severed head.
Yeah,
severed head.
I mean, Jimmy Hoffa's hand or something. I mean, come on, man.
Come on,
Some
man.
jewels.
Well, Hawk, this one's probably a little bit more up your alley then.
Because please let it be about big prostitutes.
I'll have to dig around a little bit more for that one.
All right.
But KCRA Channel 3 in Sacramento, California gives us this gem. The California Highway Patrol reports that a DUI driver crashes into a liquid manure pond near Elk Grove, California. I didn't even know there was anything called a liquid manure pond. A suspected DUI driver, of course, spent the latter half of his Memorial Day weekend in a stinky situation after crashing into a liquid manure storage pond in Sacramento County, officials said Monday. The CHP said that the driver called dispatch around 1:30 a.m. asking for help after crashing into what at the time was an unknown water source at a dairy farm on Franklin Boulevard near Elk Grove. He had not yet realized what exactly he was submerged in. 48 minutes after the initial call, firefighters from the fire department found the driver and his vehicle, which was well submerged in the manure pond. Officials later discovered that, on top of showing signs of intoxication, the driver had been trying to pull his vehicle out for about an hour before calling 911. That's 2 hours the driver's car spent submerged in manure.
Whoa. I hate manure.
Difference between police and firefighters. You notice the firefighters responded to get him out. The police drove by and said, "No, I'm not dealing with that shit," and kept going. There's, you know what? That's a difference between a rookie cop and a veteran cop. Veteran cop looks at that and says, "Nope, I'm good. I'm in service." That is no action taken. But leave it to the firemen, man. Leave it to the hose draggers to jump in and I gotta save a life. Gotta earn those cookies that all those angry housewives get me. So yeah, KCRA, man, you cracked the case on that one. Leave it to the fire department to drag the guy out of the. You know what? I mean, punishment enough, leave him in there, because you know some slick defense attorney is going to say, well, don't you know that methane is a gas? And don't you know that methane will affect the human brain? And so my client was not DUI when he drove off into that shit storm. That happened afterward, clearly. But yeah,
of course,
leave it to the fire department to ruin our good time.
All right. I've got one here that relates to our current state with, ironically, we're doing a Zoom call right now. Well, one husband is getting sick and tired of his wife being on one Zoom call after another, and he's decided, well, it's boring to just photobomb it the old-fashioned way of just kind of being in the background or showing up like we've seen in some of the news feeds where a kid walks in during a weather forecast or a dog tries to interrupt a forecaster. Nope, he's decided you need to dress up for these things. Some of the things include a cowboy outfit, Where's Waldo, and a full-on Batman costume. The Zoom prank may be a subtle one, but the fact is, the office, all starting to get a little batty, no pun intended, from having been stuck in quarantine, is finding it funnier and funnier, and now they're looking forward to their calls to see what the husband of the woman who's on these calls does each and every time. According to this, Cara Field said it started off as like, hey, get out of here, I'm on a call. And now it's like, hey, what's your husband going to do today? And if you go look for the story, husband photo bombing wife's Zoom meeting, you get pictures of some of them that people have captured, including the Batman costume, the cowboy outfit, and the Where's Waldo. He also dressed in a big fur coat like a mountain man explorer. He dressed like one of the Power Rangers at one point. He put on a hockey mask looking like Jason and more. So go check that out. A way to keep things light and funny while you're doing these Zoom meetings.
I wonder when their divorce proceedings start.
No, apparently the wife thinks it's cool because everybody wants to find out what will he wear next. And she's like, I have no idea when he'll even show up. He just will pop into her in the background of the Zoom meetings wearing these outfits.
I think he could be caught on camera doing a lot worse. So good on him, man. Good job.
Good on him.
Yeah. A lot worse.
Absolutely.
A lot worse, Walt, would be the divorce proceeding. Yeah. So it's
right.
Yeah. Dressing up like Waldo is a lot better than roughing up the bishop. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. No harm, no foul on that one.
Well, since Memorial Day was a couple weeks ago, let's use the military term for it. It's better than being caught having a dishonorable discharge, if you get my drift.
What's that on your hands? Oh,
see, I told you this was going to be a boring episode.
You're never actually going to air this ever, are you?
We're not even going to edit it. This goes raw tonight.
It goes live right now. As soon as we get done, publish. All right, that's our news segment. So it means we come full circle to the end where we kind of talk about what we've been watching this past week, or reading, or maybe binging in terms of streaming television, or I don't know. In Hawk's case, getting out and trying to figure out the next motorcycle shop to stop by and get some work done. But no, in all seriousness, movie-wise, Walt, you got anything you want to recommend? Stuff you've been trying to put or trying to watch and maybe give to our listeners?
Yeah, actually, I've been waiting for this one to hit Amazon Prime and not have to pay for it. But there's a great documentary called Making Apes. It's the artists who changed film, and it's about the group of artists who did the original Planet of the Apes makeup and how the way that they did the Planet of the Apes original movie totally changed everything in Hollywood and how movies are made. It's about an hour long, and it is really amazing. And as a big fan of Planet of the Apes, I loved that documentary. So if you get a chance, check that out. Again, it's on Amazon Prime this month at least for free, and it's called Making Apes. It is really awesome.
Fantastic. Hawk, you got anything maybe that you've been watching of late? Anything you've been streaming that you might want to recommend to the audience?
Well, as a Norwegian, of course, I've been watching Vikings, and that I've been watching that. But really, I would say better than Vikings is Norseman. It's on Netflix. You have to search for it. But Norseman, it's in English, but it's filmed in Norway, and it's sort of a comedy about Viking life around the turn of the last millennium. Sorry. So it's really funny. You check out Norseman and Norseman
sounds cool.
And you will fall in love with Freya. Everyone does.
Oh,
all right,
cool.
Okay, I just added that to my watch list. Yeah, so that'll be.
I gotta check that out. For me, because it was just a couple of weeks ago, Memorial Day. It was one of my favorite movies to watch with my dad. My dad passed away a little over 3 years ago. Talked about him on this past Memorial Day. He's buried in the Georgia National Cemetery. Was buried with full military honors for a lifetime of service. So I broke out Patton, the fantastic movie with George C. Scott. It's a movie that actually has, in the midst of the movie, the intermission symbol come up. It's so long, but it's so great. It's one of those movies that it doesn't matter where I am, if I'm flipping around, if I come across it, wherever it is in the movie, I'm watching it to the end. It ranks up there with movies like Jaws and Indiana Jones and Star Wars and all those. I know it's a biopic. It's World War II, but it is so engaging. It is a magnificent performance by George C. Scott. If you've never seen it or if it's been a long time, break it out. There's a reason why he was given the Academy Award in 1970. I guess it was 1971 for this 1970 film. Came out on April 2nd, 1970. Just hit 50 years ago that movie was released, and it is still probably one of the best war movies set in Europe to explain what the Third Army did in Patton's history.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's one of my favorite war movies. I didn't watch that one this weekend, but I did watch The Big Red One, which has always been one of my favorites. And then, of course, there are two midways. That has
a different meaning now in my house.
What can you do, Hawk? I'm sorry. I apologize.
Wow, I mean, I'm so sensitive. That sounds. Wow. You know what? So, to talk about Patton, so much of that, when you watch these movies like Patton, like Saving Private Ryan, like Band of Brothers, like We Were Soldiers Once and Young. Well, We Were Soldiers. Sorry. I'm right. A book reader too. Weird, right? Yeah. I'm an author and read too. Yeah,
very odd.
That's very odd.
Very odd.
Weird. Anyway, all of those are about really boil down to leadership lessons, not just for men, but for women too. For any audience reading that, it is even if World War II doesn't interest you, or even if war doesn't interest you, just the concept of leadership. If you're on a sales team, or if you're, working as a grocer and need to motivate that new 16-year-old employee to do something, if you can watch Patton, I'm not recommending that you slap the kid. I'm just, as Patton would have.
Well, there are times when it's appropriate.
But as Patton did, and just the history of Patton, he died in a minor car crash, which is just such a loss. Which is a reminder, hey kids, wear your seatbelts. All right.
Yes.
All I have about
public
that.
Safety announcement from our ex-officer. Yeah. No, you know what's crazy about that is The Last Days of Patton, which was actually not a bad flick. It's amazing. The guy, the adventures he went through, the life he led, the sort of idea of the reincarnation, the battles he believed he'd fought in one lifetime after another, and to be done in by basically a car accident. And it wasn't like instantaneous. It took days and days and days and days. And so The Last Days of Patton is actually not a bad flick to watch to kind of catch the back end of how Patton died and how what his thoughts were in those final days. All right, podcasts. Anything? Shout outs, recommendations? I got a couple that I'll go to Walt first. We'll keep going in the same circle.
Well, I'll tell you, there are so many out there that I've been watching, and I can't remember if I mentioned this one last week, but in fact, I don't think I did because I just started listening to it. There's one called Fake Doctors, Real Friends with Zach and Donald, and it's the guys who did the show. It's the hospital show. Scrubs, yeah. And they're going through each of the episodes of Scrubs one episode at a time. And it is great because those two guys are hilarious to start with, but then being able to hear the background of each of the shows and the actors and stuff like that is really, really hilarious. And then one that you and I have been on, we've talked about before, the Movie by Minute, Hitchcock Minute. They are getting close to wrapping up North by Northwest. So great movie. We had 10 minutes of episodes.
First 10 minutes. We were responsible for opening the season. Yeah.
Yeah. And just, I've caught kind of pieces here and there, and I really want to go back and listen to all the episodes, but it has really been a great podcast. So I really encourage you, if you're into the Movies by Minute podcast, check that one out. Definitely worth your time. Done by several different teams of Movie by Minute podcast groups. So definitely one to dive into and check out.
Yeah, the guy we talked about last week, Jim O'Kane, that's the brain trust behind it. He said the whole point is to give you sort of a sampling of different Movies by Minutes hosts. So that way you say, well, these guys I kind of like, or these girls I kind of like, or maybe I don't like them, but it gives you a chance to hear a lot of different voices throughout the course of one movie. So it is really cool.
And a great classic movie as well.
Hawk, do you got any podcasts you want to recommend? Anything you listen to?
So I would recommend Techie and the Cowboy. Now, Techie and the Cowboy, it's a complete mishmash, but it's a guy he's a fitness guru, technical expert, and a guy who is he's a cowboy. He's a fellow author. That's how I know him. But but these two, when they get together, they talk about so many different subjects and have really interesting guests on. Now, I'm not plugging it just because they interviewed me last week, but I've been listening to them for a while, and I was so happy to get the call to listen in or to be interviewed by him. But Techie and the Cowboy is a good one. It's just a lot of fun, and they kind of bounce off of each other because Techie is, as the name would imply, kind of technical, and the Cowboy is kind of not. He's kind of crude and direct. So they are. But that's a great podcast. So check that one out.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to do two back to back very quickly. I'm going to give a shout out to our good friends over at the Real Queens of Queens, two women that grew up as friends in the streets of Brooklyn and Queens, New York, and they put out an episode pretty much every week or every other week, depending. It's been a little slower with the pandemic, and it's kind of a neat behind the scenes, almost a Seinfeld-esque version of just kind of talking about nothing, and yet they're so engaging and funny and very much not safe for work. But I would check them out. And our good friends, another not safe for work and certainly politically incorrect, the Bad Cop Show. They got they got booted off of Podbeam. But now they found a new home. So search for Bad Cop Show. And Jerry and Dave are very funny, very irreverent, but I laugh every time when I listen to one of their episodes because I have a sense of humor and I can differentiate between comedy and meanness. And they don't have a mean bone in their bodies, but they are very irreverent. They put a fork in the eye of political correctness. So if that's not your cup of tea, you may bypass it, but I really enjoy it, and they make me crack up whenever their episodes drop.
It's a good show, and I am not surprised that they got thrown off a Podbeam.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for us. Before we do, Walt, quickly, where do people go to learn more about us?
The best place to go to learn about us is our website, thewilderride.com, and from there you can catch our past episodes, get a list of our guests and their biographies and where to find them. You can also go from there to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/thewilderride. You'll want to follow us there and then click the next button that comes up to join our listeners group. You'll be asked to answer a couple quick questions and then you're in. And in the listeners group, it's great. We have discussions about movies and all kinds of stuff that comes up. But it's all entertainment, no politics, no religion, no nothing like that. Just a good time talking about things that entertain us.
If you're on a podcatcher right now, rate and review, but more importantly, hit that share button, share the episode if you enjoyed it, tag your friends, make sure that they get a chance to hear it. Maybe they didn't know anything about what you were listening to. That would really help us as well, grows the audience, and all of our guests get a little more love as well for their pursuits and their endeavors. People may discover, I never knew there was a guy riding around all through, the Yukon and the Pacific Northwest writing about it, and now they found a new author to find. So you're not only helping us, you're helping our guest. And thank you, Hawk, so much for joining us here on this Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. We really appreciate you taking time.
Man, it was a lot of fun. And your listeners, sure, they're good people. And I appreciate them being there for us.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it. Till next week.
Yeah. Hey, Hawk, again, thanks for coming. And good catching up with you, buddy. And I'm looking forward to getting up there to see you in the wild of North Carolina at some point.
Yep, if you can make it up here to Hawk's Nest, it's a secret location. But if you can make it up here, good on you.
I'm on the way.
Okay.
All right, that's gonna do it. Take care, everybody. Till next week. Bye-bye. So, we all gonna go together, or am I not allowed?
Well, there is an initiation that I don't know that you're ready.
I mean, I don't know if there was like.
It's going to be so hard to decide.
Well, that is true. Us Navy guys are so hard.
What was your
We're really
rate?
rock solid.
What was your rate, Anthony?
Hold on. Hold that question.
So you're you want me to hold my question? I'm going to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You fucking answer. I ask. This is how this works.
Wait a minute. I didn't get stopped.
That's
I didn't get stopped.
This is an interrogation, not a conversation.
Goddamn.
I was just sitting here. I swear to God, I didn't do anything. I only had one beer.
You want this? You know what? I had two during the interview.